So in this lesson, we'll expand on the strategy of product marketing that we looked at in our last lesson and get into looking at what is known as the 4 Ps of marketing. Okay, so let's look at what this marketing mix is. So the marketing mix is a business tool used in the marketing of products. So we can kind of look at it from this marketing avenue, strategy street. So this is all about our marketing strategy. How do we develop the strategy? What's our strategy based on in order to, of course, compete with firms within the monopolistically competitive market and make a profit? So the marketing mix is often crucial when determining a product or brand's unique selling point and is often synonymous with the 4 Ps. So when we think about these 4 Ps, what we're really talking about, we're talking about the product itself, the price of said product, promotion, and place. These are our 4 Ps that when we look at the marketing aspect, that we're going to focus on how to maximize our strategy within these 4 sections in order to basically gain greater access to the market share within that competitive market. Okay, so the first one of these we'll look at in detail is product after watching that YouTube video. So market research helps to determine what good or service to produce. So let's look at some questions we need to be asking within a firm. What does the customer want? What need does this product satisfy? There's no sense in developing products that customers don't want or that customers don't view as valuable within something they're doing. There needs to be a demand for that resource. So what features does it have? What doesn't it have? And so what does it do? How and where will the customer use it? So there's all this testing that's taking place. Rumor is Apple's iPhone 7, which currently is in the production process, on like 5 or 6 different models they're testing just to determine which model would be the most effective for customer usage. So you can see how much research and testing takes place for these firms. What's the name of the product, the look of it, the experience? You could not believe how much conflict goes on just from the legal aspect of arguing these points. There's a massive lawsuit between Apple and Samsung over the look and the experience of their products, being how similar they look. If you go back and you look at pictures of the Apple's iPhone and you look at Samsung's early phones and you start to track what they look like, what you'll notice is that the 2 phones become very, very similar in the way they look with each new product release. So how is it different? And this is a really defining factor. If a Samsung phone and an iPhone look very, very similar to each other, what is the difference? What makes them different about each other other than just the operating system? There's a lot of different features here. So part of this is about standing out. So gaining a competitive advantage through product differentiation. In other words, your product needs to be different enough that it stands out and that people want your product. So companies need to remember that we buy as much with our eyes as we do with our brain. So it's not just how much we think about something, but it's also what's it look like. Okay, so our second P here is price. So price is ultimately determined by the intersection of supply and demand. This is something we've been studying, but remember that right there is in perfectly competitive markets, when in reality, what we're looking at is only imperfectly competitive markets have competition between firms on price. So we said the majority of markets are monopolistically competitive. Now that is one type of imperfectly competitive market. So only in those markets can individual firms have some effect on price. Monopolies notwithstanding, because we're going to ignore them, but they do, of course, they don't require an emphasis on marketing because they're the only firm. But when you look at monopolistically competitive markets, they compete within price, product, and of course within the quality and the marketing. So if a company cannot make a profit selling the good or service at the equilibrium, then they should not even be in the market to begin with. So the question is, how do you enter the market and gain enough shares within the market and gain enough access to the market, enough customers to be able to compete effectively and over the long run? So new firms entering the market need marketing to help establish a share of the market. And this is where this marketing comes into such an important play, is how can they gain access to customers, and how not only can they gain access to customers, how can they keep those customers over the long run? So how is this done? From a marketing perspective, we have that. We also have effective pricing. So price penetration versus price leadership is what we're going to look at, because when we talk about price as a strategy, these are two parts of our strategy. So the first part of effective pricing strategies, price penetration, is what we'll look at first. So effective pricing is an important part of establishing a market share for new firms entering monopolistically competitive markets. So price penetration is selling a new product at a low price to attract customers and establish a base in the market. So they're going to sell below equilibrium in an attempt to generate customers, to establish a customer base to gain a share of the market. By pricing below equilibrium, firms can more easily establish a market share through increased demand. And a big part of this is about the ability not just to attract, but to hold customers. So this is most effective when the product is a long lifespan. Part of that being the fact that if you're constantly having to recreate your product, it's going to get expensive. Long run, when you're talking 1 to 2 years, durable goods being 3+ years, this is a more effective strategy. So if you look at the market for tablets, Apple introduced the iPad at $499, so they set the price. When its competitors introduced their tablets, they did so at roughly the same price point and got destroyed in the market. So they went back and then introduced new tablets at much lower prices. And they use price penetration to attract customers and pull some of the market share from Apple. So if you look at this price point of $499, so Apple introduces an iPad at that $499 price point. So Microsoft responded by creating a Surface tablet, which they introduced at roughly the same price point, and it got destroyed. In one of our earlier things that we talked about at the beginning of class, that this thinking at the margin, with the example here was Microsoft with their Surface tablets, and the fact that they dropped the price significantly in order to actually try to sell some of the tablets, because at the $499 price range, they simply could not get access to the market. So they had to reduce the price. The tablet simply was not strong enough of a competitor to Apple at that price point range. And it's why companies like Amazon, with their Amazon, their Kindles, their Fire HD, they put them in at a price point of $199. That created essentially a new market at the tablets, because now you could get Apple's larger tablet at $499. You could get in between with the Surface. You could hit a $199 price point and get a whole type of different tablet. So they're beginning to open up new markets with price penetration. And then Apple, of course, responds with an iPad mini at $329, and part of the reason why is because of this smaller tablet. So they actually went to a smaller tablet at a higher price point, but the whole point for them was to make sure that they weren't losing too much of the market because of the lower price tablets. So you see how this price penetration works is companies enter the markets, and even entering the markets with new products in an attempt to maintain or attract new customers and grab a part of that market share. Okay, let's look at worldwide tablet vendors market share beginning with quarter 11. So this is the end of 2011. Notice that at the end of 2011, Apple's market share is 60%. That is significant. That's huge. But in the fourth quarter, so at the very end around Christmas time, Amazon enters the market, the tablet market, and you'll notice that, of course, it brings Apple's market share down when Amazon enters the market. So Apple market share falls when Amazon enters the market. But notice that by the beginning of 2012, Apple market share has increased while Amazon market share fell. The reason why is because Amazon market share falls is the price is just too high. So basically, Amazon enters the market, they try to directly compete with Apple at a price point, and they lose. And so you'll see what happens to them. Now, by second quarter of 2012, so this is the spring, you notice Apple's market share has increased, while Amazon's market share has very, very tinily increased some. So both see increases in market share. For Apple dropped the price, Amazon dropped price while Apple announced the introduction of the iPad mini. So they see a significant increase. Amazon sees a very tiny increase in market share, but they're still hanging in. But then you'll notice here going into quarter 3, Apple loses market share, and the reason why is because Samsung increases its market share. So Amazon increased its market share as well, but Samsung all of a sudden jumps in. Now here's the thing that we notice. Samsung is directly competing with Apple. So at that $499 price point, Apple lost in the market share because Samsung was finally able to compete with them. And all of a sudden now Amazon is in kind of a different price point market with them. So they're a step below, whereas Amazon and Samsung, well, Apple and Samsung are competing directly at the same price point. And in this, you notice that Samsung was able to gain access to a share of the market. So this slide here kind of just validates what we were saying on the last slide. When you look at the media tablet and the operating system share estimates, you'll notice, of course, that iOS market shares have been declining since introduction in 2010. So they've gone steadily down to 47.1%. While you'll notice the Android market share, of course, has increased. And the reason, of course, is very simple for that. It's because this Android marketing system is the primary competitor to iOS. Now, what this does, of course, by doing OS, is it's focused not just on different types of tablets, but just simply on it's either an Apple tablet or it's some version of an Android tablet. What that means, of course, is this. You're talking about a single company with iOS versus many different companies on this Android market share. And that's something you got to remember, because this Android market share, we're talking about tablets that are made by Google, Samsung, HP, just any number of companies. In other words, so Google's and these other companies' market share may have been increasing, but you also have to understand the fact that that is multiple companies, whereas Apple is a single company with 47.1% of the market share in 2015. So they still hold a decidedly large advantage in terms of who's gathering profits as a result of selling tablets. So when we talk about price, we talked about penetration. Now we look at leadership. So price leadership is when a leading company publishes its price ahead of everyone else and its competitors then match those prices. We saw this, of course, in our last example with Apple when it set the price point for tablets. Competitors attempted to match those prices and they failed. So notice that Apple's competitors reduced their prices after initially entering the market. So they tried to follow Apple's lead, they weren't able to, and therefore they failed. But this is a very common practice, is one company will enter the market at a certain price point and then other companies will follow. And so you end up with this price leadership, and once that's here, the rest follow. Now, if all of those companies keep their prices high and that good is a necessity, then they can make a profit. The problem within a monopolistically competitive market is we're dealing with a lot of goods that aren't necessarily necessities. So they're using the quality and the marketing to try to match each other and try to gain access. And so if the price is too high, consumers will basically say, well, I just don't need this. So this tells us that at $4.99, Apple's competitors could not satisfy the market, and as a result, they had to reduce prices. So they established new price points for different size tablets. So one market developed at the $199 price point, while another developed at that $299 to $328, $329 market price. And then the tablets sold in these markets, they differ in size, screen resolution, capacity, processing speed. In other words, at $4.99, there's not as much differentiation, whereas below that, there's far more differences in products. Okay, so what are our considerations within price? The first is expected profit. Before you're going to set any price at all, you need to understand your total revenue, your total costs, and start to get an idea of where your profits may look like. And of course, in order to do that, you're going to have to look at the cost of your production. You can get a general idea of where your total revenue is going to be. So you need to know what your production cost is, so that way you can figure out just what's the minimum price you can go and then work from that. So also you have to look at the cost of advertising. How much is it going to cost you to market this product effectively to gain a share of the market? And then, of course, the cost of selling. It's not like this is just free. I mean, you've got to be able to put these products within stores. You've got to be able to sell them to customers. The stores themselves are going to mark up the price, so you've got to be able to make sure you get that price in there. What is it going to cost you to actually sell this product within the market? Then there's the cost of distributing the product itself. So you have all of these different considerations that must be taken into account as you're trying to develop your pricing and ultimately, of course, maximize your profits. And the last of our 4 P's is promotion. So promotion is the use of advertising and other methods to inform consumers of new or improved products. Traditionally, we think of advertising as newspapers, billboards, TV commercials, and radio ads. Today, though, those marketing methods are joined with like internet advertising, TV show product placements, and social media marketing. And what we'll do with these last couple of slides is you're going to look at a video that will give you some ideas of how TV show product placement has worked. We'll look at some of the different methods of internet advertising, and then we'll look at social media marketing. And then the last thing we'll do in this unit before you do the quiz 10 is to look specifically at different ways in which social media has been used to market products in today's world. So on this slide, we're looking at the internet marketing tree. So you can see by having a website, most companies today have a website. If they don't, I don't really know what they're thinking, because you can make them for free. So when you talk about your website, you'll notice the roots of this are the research, strategy, branding, and content. And then you'll notice all the different branches out into social media marketing, public relations, advertising, and all of these different things. So for a lot of companies, starting with a website is the initial location, mainly because you don't even need an actual place anymore, because you can sell everything online, and you can use Amazon and eBay to do so. So much of what companies do is related to that internet and their website, and then how they branch off from there within their marketing. And so you see a lot of this today, particularly with email campaigns, social media, which we'll look a lot more at, just how they do things, how they get their name to move higher up that list of Google when you start searching stuff. All of this is driven by a strategy and research into how they're going to market their products online. Okay, so if any one part of marketing campaigns for firms has changed in the few years, it's been this use of social media. There's so many different avenues now. I mean, if you think about the way in which you can advertise through YouTube, through Facebook, through Twitter, through Pinterest, through all of these different social media aspects, companies, and they can do it, you know, in some cases for free, in other cases they're spending huge amounts of money. But the way in which firms today push their products through social media is pretty much probably where they're spending their most money. I mean, this is how they're driving campaigns, because everyone has some form of social media account today. And so it's become an extremely important part of their media marketing and their aspects. You'll notice the green hand with the thumbs up, that's like. The use of Facebook to advertise, and the use of likes within Facebook to advertise and to push your advertising out has become an extremely important part of a firm's product strategy, because that is what's driving, because when you like it, your friends see that, then they like it, and that just generates this idea that they're using people to be able to push their advertising out across different platforms into more and more people, so that your friends see it and their friends see it, and so on and so on.